The Christmas lights were glittering all over my living room, bouncing off the dishes I had just set on the table. Everything I'd spent 3 whole days preparing, from the deep red tablecloth to that soft hint of cinnamon in the air, should have made tonight feel warm. But the moment that door opened and that man stepped inside, the whole room turned colder than the winter air outside. My hand shook so hard the wineglass almost hit the floor. I looked at my husband Derek, the man a black woman from Chicago had loved with every piece of my heart, and his face went pale, like he'd just seen a ghost. As for the man standing in the doorway, he wasn't a guest. He wasn't supposed to be here. He was the man I invited so I could finally end everything. The smile on my lips wasn't sweet. It was the smile of a woman who's been betrayed, torn apart, and pushed all the way to her limit. I heard Derek stammer, You, you know who he is, Maya." I nodded slowly, set the wineglass down, kept my voice steady, scary steady. "Of course. And tonight, you're gonna find out exactly what I know." I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I just pulled out my chair, real slow, looked around at all the faces, turning to stone at the table, and said, "But before everything blows up, let me tell you all my side of the story. And if you're still listening right now, who do you think the man at the door is? Drop your guess in the comments before I keep going. I want to know what you felt in that moment." I stood frozen in the middle of my little carefully decorated kitchen. The smell of garlic butter roast chicken mixing with warm cinnamon, the kind of scent that should have made the room glow. But every breath I took felt cold, sharp, like needles stabbing straight into my lungs. I could still hear the slow footsteps coming from the living room, the footsteps of a man who had no damn business showing up here tonight. I had never seen Derek, my husband, look that pale. The warm cocoa brown skin I used to trace with my fingers looked drained, washed out, like somebody pulled the blood right out of him. His eyes were wide, wild, like an animal cornered with nowhere left to run. And me, I had my hand pressed against the counter just to steady myself, though my palm still trembled. Not from fear, not from anger, but because I knew this moment right here, this was the beginning of the end of everything I used to call a marriage. I heard him, the man at the door, speak in that low, rough voice. "Sorry if I'm a little early, Maya." He looked at me with those heavy, tired eyes. Eyes filled with a sadness I understood too well, because I had seen that same look staring back at me in the mirror. I nodded, motioned him inside like I was welcoming a guest to a holiday dinner. Except this guest didn't bring gifts. He brought the truth, the very thing Derek feared most. If you looked at that scene from outside, you might have thought it was just another holiday gathering in a black family out in the suburbs of Atlanta. Soft golden lights, a little Christmas music drifting from the living room, the smell of pumpkin pie floating through the house. But behind all that peace was a thin sheet of ice, ready to crack with just one sentence. Derek swallowed hard, the skin on his throat turning from brown to a sickly gray. "Maya, what are you doing?" His voice shook like even his vocal cords were trembling with fear. I turned around slowly. I wanted him to see my eyes, not the eyes of the quiet, patient wife he thought he knew, but the eyes of a woman who'd lived in the dark long enough to learn exactly how to drag the truth into the light. "I'm doing what you should have faced a long time ago," I said. I walked to the dining table. The deep red tablecloth, the one I picked, because Derek loves Christmas red, suddenly looked like a stage set for punishment. Beside me, the other man sat down in the exact extra chair I had intentionally placed. The same extra chair Derek asked me about earlier. Now he knew. I let the silence stretch, a technique speakers call letting the flood gather. When tension hits its peak, just one line can destroy everything. I took a slow breath. "Before you ask me why, let me tell everybody what led to tonight." The whole room went still. Even the man beside me, Jordan Walker, lifted his head. He didn't smile, didn't nod. He just waited, knowing the story was about to break his heart all over again. I rested my hands on the table, brushing the rim of a glass, like I was debating where to begin. But the truth was, I had rehearsed this opening for weeks. I remember the exact day My life shifted. I began my voice soft but sharp like a blade. Not today. Not when Jordan called to confirm what I already suspected. But 3 months ago, I looked straight at Derek. The day I realized you weren't the man I married anymore. Derek's fists tightened, his knuckles turning white. But I kept going. 3 months ago, I walked into our 5-year anniversary dinner full of love. I cooked all his favorites: honey braised ribs, buttered greens, creamy gold potatoes. I straightened my hair, put on the navy dress he said made my brown skin glow. I used to be proud of my skin. It reminded me of my mama, a strong woman with tight curls and the prettiest smile in the whole South Side. But that night, it felt like even my own skin couldn't hold me together. While waiting for Derek, I set the table. Candles lit, jazz playing low, everything perfect. Until his phone lit up on the counter. At first, I ignored it. I wasn't the type to go through my husband's phone. My mama always told me trust is the foundation of a marriage, Maya. But my foundation had already started to rot. The phone buzzed again and again and again. By the fifth, sixth vibration, I walked over. A preview message popped up from a name I didn't know, and Evans, I meant to look away, but my eyes caught one line. Do you still think about that night? I can still smell your cologne on my shoulder. My heart clenched like somebody crushed it in their fist. I tapped the screen, not because I wanted to, but because fear pushed my finger forward. No password. Derek never hid his phone from me. But inside those messages was something I never ever thought I'd see. Pictures of them in an elevator, good night texts with hearts, plans to meet at the old room, and the line that ripped me open. Just give me a little more time. I promise I'll take care of everything. Take care of what, for who I didn't need the answer. I paused my story at the table, letting the room feel the weight of it. Derek stared at the floor, running from my eyes like a coward. I thought I had seen enough, I said. But God wasn't done showing me the truth. I remembered standing by the sink, not crying, just frozen. My emotions flapping inside my chest like a terrified bird. But the worst part hadn't even come yet. 3 weeks later, I found the credit card bill, a charge from a downtown hotel on the same night I was admitted to the ER with severe stomach pain. Derek told me he was in a last-minute meeting, but that bill said he was in room 1408 with Ann Evans. I looked at Derek, then not asking with words, but with the silence that hurts more. Why? But he didn't dare look back. My story doesn't have screaming matches, or plates being thrown, or me breaking down on the floor. I'm not that kind of woman. I'm the kind who lets heartbreak turn into steel. I thought about divorce right then, but life ain't that simple. Feelings ain't switches you can flip off. I needed time to understand, to watch, to gather every piece of the truth. And that's when Jordan came into the picture. Jordan called after seeing the anonymous email I sent. His voice cracked when he talked about his fiancée Naomi Evans, the same in Evans and Derek's phone. He said he noticed the changes, but never imagined this. We met in a small cafe where the smell of roasted beans and the grind of the machine tried their best to soothe two hearts that had been ripped out. I want to know everything, Jordan said. I do too, I replied. And just like that, two strangers who'd been betrayed found themselves bound by the same storm. We became allies. I looked at Derek, still silent. I knew he wanted to interrupt, to deny, to blame me, to use that tired excuse cheaters love. You didn't pay attention to me. You made me feel alone. You pushed me away. But tonight, he wasn't escaping. Derek, do you remember that night I asked? The night I lay alone in that hospital bed, barely able to breathe? While you disappeared and told me you were working? His eyes squeezed shut. He remembered. While I was in pain, you were in a hotel with her. Jordan clenched his fist but stayed silent, letting me finish. That night, I said I knew the man standing in front of me now ain't the man I married. I turned to both men, my husband and the man he'd betrayed alongside me, and gave them the truth, and that is why we're all sitting here this Christmas Eve. I placed a hand on my chest, not acting, not pretending to be strong. My heart was truly beating heavy. So you, Derek, and you, Jordan, can hear the whole truth. The room fell into silence again. No music, no clinking plates, no laughter, just the breathing of three people, each standing on a different side, yet trapped inside the same betrayal. And I knew this was only the beginning of the storm. The living room was so quiet I could hear the heavy tick, tick, tick of the wall clock cutting through the air. Jordan sat across from Derek, but neither of them looked at each other, like if their eyes met, the truth would explode all over again. And me, I took a long, steady breath because the next part of my story was the one that stripped everything bare. The part that answered the question I didn't want to ask myself. When did my love start breaking? Without me noticing, I placed both hands on the table, bowed my head just a little, and kept going. My voice softer, but the feeling beneath it just as sharp. The truth is, what hurt me most wasn't the messages. It was realizing the signs had been there a long time ago. I just chose not to see them. Everything started with tiny changes in Derek, so small that if we didn't live together, no one else would have noticed. He came home later. He ate less. His phone was always face down, something he never used to do. He started spending extra time in front of the mirror every morning, fixing his collar, trying two or three colognes, smiling at his reflection like a man getting ready for a date. A date that wasn't with his wife. I used to tell myself maybe he's trying to impress clients, maybe it's a new project. But what kind of project makes a man you've loved for 7 years start feeling like a stranger? One night while I was putting away laundry, I walked into the bedroom and found Derek holding a dress shirt by the bed. He jumped like I'd caught him stealing. "You scared me," he said, rubbing the back of his neck. I laughed. "I didn't do anything. You wearing that tomorrow?" He hesitated just a moment, then nodded and shoved the shirt back into the closet. The way he slammed that door sounded like he was trying to hide something behind it. I didn't ask. I didn't want to be the suspicious wife. Or maybe I was scared of the answer. But truth doesn't disappear just because you refuse to look at it. One night, Derek left his phone on the kitchen counter while he got some water. The screen lit up, flashing one short line: "Drive safe." Okay. I saw it before he could flip the phone over. I froze. Not because of the message, but because of that tiny red heart. He looked up, face draining. "It's a coworker, marketing team." They joke around like that. I didn't say a word. I just placed my hand on the old wooden table where we used to sit and talk for hours. My hand felt cold. Derek immediately switched the subject, asked about my day, asked if I was tired. I answered everything, but inside something dropped deep inside me, like a stone hitting the bottom of a lake. At this point, I lifted my eyes to Jordan. He nodded. Men don't act as different as they think, especially when they're hiding something. I tried to deny it for weeks. I continued. But some things you just can't unsee. I turned the wine glass slowly, watching the red swirl, looking exactly like my own confusion during those months. The morning everything changed. One October morning, Derek left for work earlier than usual. He kissed my forehead, a kiss that felt rehearsed mechanical. Missing something, missing warmth, missing love, missing truth. I sat up in bed, leaning on the headboard, watching him walk out. When the door closed, the house felt too quiet, quiet in a way that makes your ribs tighten. I went to the kitchen to make coffee, and that's when Derek's laptop, left on the counter, which he never forgot, pinged with a new email. A subject line flashed: "Hotel service invoice." "Thank you for your stay." I tilted my head. Derek hadn't traveled anywhere recently. I moved closer, heart pounding so loud I could feel it in my throat. All I had to do was hover the mouse to open it. I stood there for a whole minute fighting myself. If I opened it, I'd meet the truth face to face. If I didn't, I'd stay trapped in this bleeding doubt forever. At the end, I opened it. A downtown hotel, a double room, laundry service, breakfast for two, date 3 nights ago, the same night Derek said he had to stay late for strategy meetings. My hand braced the counter. The smell of the coffee machine filled the room, but I didn't feel or hear anything except my own pulse. And then I saw the last line: "Registered guest N. Evans." I didn't know who that was. I didn't know the gender, the face, the voice. But I knew that name was going to change my whole life. That night, Derek came home. I watched him take off his coat, shake the rain from his shoulders. Under the kitchen light, he looked calm, too calm. "What do you want for dinner, babe?" he asked. A question most wives would welcome. But that night, it felt like a thorn pushing into my chest. I stared at him for a long moment. He stopped moving. "What's wrong, Maya?" I forced a smile. "Nothing." I didn't ask about the invoice, didn't ask about N. Evans, because I wanted to see, would he ever tell me the truth himself? He didn't. The days after that felt like living in two worlds. On the outside, strong calm, working, smiling. On the inside, every cell in my body tightening from suspicion and hurt. I started noticing things I used to overlook. Derek texting when my back was turned. Him locking his phone the second I walked into a room. A new cologne, amber and wood, when he once said he never liked that kind. One night, while we were watching a movie, his phone buzzed. He jumped so hard he dropped his glass. I didn't even look at the screen. But the way he looked at me, like he'd been caught in a trap. "Just work," he said quickly, smiling that tight fake smile. That wasn't my husband's smile. That was the smile of a man hiding something. One evening, while putting away laundry, I found the white dress shirt Derek always kept neatly tucked away. It was clean pressed, but the collar still smelled faintly of something unfamiliar. Not his scent, not mine. A soft jasmine note mixed with vanilla, a woman's scent. I stood there, not crying, not screaming, not throwing it across the room, just silently asking, why does she get more of you than I do? And that I said finally, staring straight into Derek's eyes, was the moment I knew our marriage was nothing but a shell. Derek said nothing. Jordan's jaw tightened so hard I saw the muscle twitch. I went on. I didn't know everything yet. I didn't know her face, her voice, her story. But I knew one thing: I couldn't trust you anymore. And that doubt pushed me toward my next step. I paused, letting the silence settle. Then I said it. That was when I decided to follow you. The air in the room shifted, heavy, thick, like my words had just opened the door to the deeper level of hell that betrayal leads to. The living room felt like an abandoned church, silent, hollow, and heavy with things unsaid. Jordan watched me carefully, like he was bracing himself for another knife to the heart. Derek kept his head down, fingers laced together, trembling just a little. He knew this was the part he feared the most, the part where I stopped pretending and started looking straight at the truth he'd been trying to bury. I inhaled, held my breath for a second, then went on. Right after I found that hotel invoice, I knew I couldn't keep pretending I was blind. I couldn't let love or loyalty keep me stupid anymore. In the days that followed, I started watching Derek not with the eyes of a wife in love, but with the eyes of a woman gathering evidence for her own heartbreak. I didn't want to be a spy. God knows I used to hate stories about women following their husbands. But when pain sinks deep into your bones, your mind gets colder than you ever thought possible. I didn't start tailing him right away. I began with the smallest things: what time he came home, how often he checked his phone, those sudden overtime meetings, the strange scents lingering on his clothes, and most of all, his eyes. Whenever I asked a simple question, one night I asked Derek, "Work been stressing you out lately?" He let out this awkward little laugh. "Just minor stuff, babe. Don't worry about it." But his palms were sweaty, his eyes slid somewhere else, and he forgot that I wasn't just his wife. I used to be the person he told everything to for 7 years. He wouldn't look at me anymore, and that is the loudest sign of betrayal. I pulled out a small black notebook, the kind my mama used to say every woman should have one when she wants to stay awake. I started writing things down. Monday, 9:32 p.m. Came home late, jasmine scent on his shirt. Wednesday, said he had a team meeting but no meeting on his company app. Friday, phone buzzed. He jumped so hard he dropped his spoon. I didn't confront him, didn't blow up. I just collected. The more I wrote, the clearer it became, like I was piecing together a picture Derek thought I'd never see. But what pushed me to go further was the phone call the next night. Around 11 p.m., Derek went into the bathroom. His phone started buzzing on the table. I didn't touch it. I just looked at the screen and Evans, there it was again. What hit me hard wasn't the call itself, it was the fact that she was calling on video. Nobody video calls that late, unless the relationship is intimate. I watched the phone vibrate, each buzz pounding against my ribs. Derek stepped out, saw the screen lit up, and his face went ghost pale. He snatched the phone, hung up immediately, and turned to me with this forced smile. Just a coworker. She's drunk, calling random people. I didn't respond. I just looked at him for a long time. And in that stare, I saw fear, the kind of fear guilty men carry around inside them. Right then, I knew I had to go deeper. The next day, Derek said he had a team meeting that might run late. I nodded, but instead of staying home, I grabbed my keys and left right after him. I'm no professional investigator, but being a Black woman from Chicago had already taught me this. Sometimes survival means paying attention to everything other people ignore. I parked a few spaces back, kept my distance. His headlights came on, and he pulled out heading toward the freeway, not toward the office, not toward his parents' house, not toward anywhere he'd ever mentioned. I knew that route. It led straight into the part of town filled with high rises, bars, hotels, and fancy condos. My heart went wild in my chest, but my hand stayed on the wheel. I kept following in silence. When his car finally stopped in front of a tall building with a gold sign that read The Willow Residence, my legs went numb even though I was still sitting in the driver's seat. I parked down the block, watched him step out, watched him fix his shirt, watched him pull out his phone and text someone. A few minutes later, the lobby doors opened. A woman walked out. She was tall, with soft curls falling around her face, wearing a long white boot. She glanced around and smiled when she saw Derek. That smile wasn't a coworker smile. It was the smile of a woman waiting on her man. I couldn't see her face clearly from where I was, but I saw her wrap her arms around him, and I saw him hug her back. I bit my lip so hard I tasted blood, but I didn't make a sound. Derek looked at her the way he used to look at me, like she was the light in his darkness. I had just watched it with my own eyes. This wasn't a text. It wasn't an invoice. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was real, live in front of me. I don't know how long I sat in that car, 10 minutes, 30, an hour. All I know is I drove home with no memory of the road, just the feeling of my insides twisting, like someone was squeezing my lungs, making it hard to breathe. But the first twist wasn't even the worst one. 2 days later, I got an email from an anonymous address. Are you Maya Johnson? I need to talk to you about Derek. I could barely breathe reading that line. Who emails me about my husband right when I've been following him? I wrote back short. About what? Minutes later, another email came in. If you still love him, you need to know the truth. And if you don't, you need to know it even more. Then came an address, a small coffee shop on the corner of Peachtree. I sat with it for a long time. I was scared it was a setup, scared I was walking into more hurt. But my intuition, that quiet voice every woman has, told me I had to go. When I walked into the cafe, the first person who looked at me was a man I'd never seen before. He was sitting in the corner, gray jacket, head slightly bowed, hands wrapped around a steaming cup of coffee, like he needed its warmth to stay standing. As I approached, he looked up, and I saw it in his eyes, immediately eyes shattered into pieces. This was Jordan Walker. He stood, reached out his hand. I'm Jordan, Jordan Walker. His voice was low, tired, with a slight tremor, but his gaze was steady straight into mine. He said, I think we've got someone in common we need to talk about. I sat down. My heart hammered harder with every word that followed. I'm Naomi Evans's fiance. For a second, the whole cafe tilted. Naomi Evans and Evans. The hotel invoice, the late night video call at 11 p.m., the woman in the white coat. All the pieces crashed together like glass shattering. I swallowed the fresh wave of pain rising in my throat and asked Horse, "Are you?" Sure, Jordan slid his phone across the table. Messages, photos, wedding plans, love notes, promises, and worst of all, messages Naomi had sent Derek. Different tone, different style, but the same themes: love, longing, secrets, perfume, hotel rooms. Jordan said I suspected something. But when I saw your email, I knew I had to meet you. I clenched my hands together to stop the shaking. There we were, two strangers standing on the same battlefield neither of us had signed up for. I looked at Jordan and said the first thing that came to my mind. So, we're both being cheated on. Jordan nodded a sad smile, tugging weakly at his lips. I'm hurting just like you are, he said. But hurt like this, we can't stay quiet. And that was the moment I knew I wouldn't be fighting this war alone anymore. Ever since that meeting at the cafe with Jordan, I went home carrying a feeling I couldn't quite name. Lighter and heavier at the same time. Lighter because I finally had someone standing on my side of the battlefield, someone who understood the kind of pain words can't really hold. But heavier because I knew this: once you start digging into the dark, there's no going back to the old light. When I opened the door and walked in, Derek was on the couch, eyes fixed on the TV, but his fingers were twisting the hem of his shirt between them. That little nervous habit he only had when something was eating at him. I stood there for a few seconds just watching. He either didn't hear me come in, or he pretended not to. I walked around the sofa, setting my bag down on the table. Derek finally looked up. "Maya, where you coming from?" The question sounded normal, but his eyes didn't. I smiled. "Met up with a friend." "What friend? Someone you don't know." His brows pulled together. He didn't say anything, but the air between us tightened. Just a few weeks ago, that line would have made him laugh, pull me close, tell me to go out and make it have a good time. Now it hit him like an arrow straight to the chest because he knew he didn't own the right to demand answers anymore. I didn't explain. I walked past him, poured myself a glass of water, and let him watch me like he wanted to ask 1,000 questions. But I didn't give him the chance. I wasn't yelling, I wasn't throwing things. I was just distant, the same way he'd been with me. That night, while Derek was in the shower, I sat back down at the kitchen table, the same place I'd asked myself over and over what I did wrong. Except this time, I opened my laptop and did something I never thought I'd do. I searched for the name Naomi Evans. There are moments in life when you think you already know what pain feels like, and then life shows you you don't. I typed her name, hit enter, and each search result that appeared felt like another slap across my face. Naomi Evans, 32, therapist. Specializes in couples counseling, engagements, and marriages. Frequently hosts workshops on loyalty and love. Author of a little book titled Love Needs Honesty, Lord. I stared at the screen feeling like I'd just swallowed a bone sideways. I scrolled further. Pictures of Naomi standing on stages at conferences, long curly hair, pretty face, that confident look of a woman who thinks she's a guiding light for broken couples. She smiled so gently in those photos. The kind of smile that says, "I'm here to help you heal." I leaned my head back in the chair. God, what am I even looking at right now? The woman tearing my marriage apart was out here teaching other people how to keep theirs from falling apart. Is there a pain more poisonous than that? I took screenshots of everything, every page, every bio line, every post. I emailed them all to Jordan. A few minutes later, he called. "Maya, you joking with me?" I wish I was. I I can't believe this. Naomi, standing in front of hundreds of people talking about honesty and taking all that honesty off the moment she's alone with Derek. Jordan let out a sigh so heavy it sounded like it was carrying shame on its back. "We gotta dig deeper." I knew he was right. What I didn't know was that digging deeper would lead us to something that kept me up at night for weeks. We started talking regularly. Jordan sent me photos of Naomi at workshops, her work schedule, the dates she claimed to be traveling for business. I compared those with the nights Derek said he had to work late. The results were chilling. There was a week where Naomi traveled for a 3-day conference. And those same 3 days, Derek came home late. Another night, Naomi stayed late at the office. And Derek stayed late at the office. The two people cheating on us were moving in sync like twins. One time, Jordan sent me a picture of Naomi at the grocery store holding a white tote bag she always carried. That same night, Derek came home, and there was a white handkerchief in his car smelling like jasmine, the same jasmine scent I'd picked up on his collar before. My heart beat in this ugly, uneven way as I put the pieces together. No single piece of proof was a knife on its own, but each tiny detail was a needle, and 1,000 needles can hurt worse than one clean cut. But that still wasn't the worst part. One evening, Jordan sent me a PDF. He attached a note, Maya, you need to see this, but be ready. I opened it. Inside was a therapy intake form, client name, Derek Johnson, reason guidance on emotional direction, currently torn between two options. Note, client requests full confidentiality, intends to bring a family member in future session. Therapist Naomi Evans. I almost dropped my phone. Derek went to Naomi to ask her who he should choose, me or her. I sank back into my chair. Tears started spilling, not because I was sad, but because something inside my chest was boiling so violently, it had nowhere else to go. I wasn't crying for him anymore. I was crying for myself, for the humiliation of watching the man I once loved sit across from his mistress and ask her advice on which woman he should build his future with. Is there a humiliation more vicious than that? Is there a deeper cut to a woman's pride? After that discovery, I stopped feeling anything at all. Not sadness, not hurt, just empty. I started doing what women do when they've been pushed past their limits. I made a plan. But just when I was beginning to prepare myself to finally confront Derek, I realized he had started watching me too. One night he said, you've been out a lot lately. I noticed you not home, like before. I've been busy. I answered, busy with what? With my business. Derek went quiet, but his eyes sharpened. For the first time, I saw real suspicion in his face. He stepped a little closer than I was comfortable with. Maise, what are you doing behind my back? I looked him dead in the eye. The same thing you've been doing behind mine. He flinched. That sentence hit him like a stone he couldn't dodge. But he didn't yell, didn't throw excuses. He just stood there, awkward and shaky, trying to hold onto a secret that was already slipping through his fingers. I turned away, didn't give him a chance to ask more. But I knew. Derek finally felt the danger. He started watching every shift in my tone, every move I made every time I stepped out the door. Maybe he thought I was just starting to suspect something, but what he didn't know was that I already knew everything. And what he also didn't know was that I was about to find out something even worse than all of it, a truth so heavy that even with all our preparation, it knocked the air right out of both me and Jordan. If you've stayed with me this far, can you guess what the worst thing was that we were about to uncover? Drop your guess in the comments. I want to know if your intuition is sharp enough to see this twist coming. Ever since the day I found out Derek had gone to Naomi to get relationship advice, I haven't looked at the world the same. Everything in my life, the kitchen lights, the sound of chopping vegetables, the slam of a car door carried a different weight. Like every little detail was quietly reminding me that my marriage had been rotting for so long. It only needed the slightest touch to split wide open. I didn't talk to Derek much. I didn't get jealous, didn't accuse him, didn't give him the anger he probably rehearsed excuses for. My silence shook him more than any confrontation ever could. Sometimes I'd catch him standing in the doorway of our bedroom, watching me for long stretches of time, his eyes caught somewhere between fear and suspicion. Like a guilty man suddenly realizing the security cameras have been on, but he doesn't know how much they recorded. One evening, while I was sorting through a pile of papers in the office, Derek walked in. He leaned against the wall and asked in a soft, forced voice, Maya, you okay? I didn't look up. I'm fine. You seem different lately. Do I? Yeah. You cold? You keep your distance. Why you think that I asked it calmly? But he went quiet instantly. He knew exactly what that question meant. What I was really asking was, what do you know that I know? I finally looked up and met his eyes. That look made him step back, half a pace, like I'd slapped him without touching him. You know the reason I said, you just don't want to look at it? Derek pressed his lips together and lowered his head. He didn't say another word. He left the room, closing the door so gently I couldn't tell if he was afraid the noise might break his last bit of denial or expose him completely. When the door clicked shut, I sat down, gripping my black notebook, the one where I'd written down every sign of betrayal. And right then, I knew I couldn't keep sitting around waiting for him to confess. Cheaters rarely confess. They only confess when the truth is shoved so deep down their throat they choke on it. So I moved into the stage I call collecting traces. I wasn't tailing Derek like some movie detective. I just watched the things he thought I'd never noticed: the long showers, the sudden phone locks, the gym bag trips without a speck of sweat, the new shirts, even though there wasn't a single occasion to wear them to. But the strongest confirmation came from Naomi herself. One evening, Jordan sent me a message. You need to see this. It was a screenshot from Naomi's Instagram. A picture of a wine glass on a wooden table in some small restaurant, soft candles glowing beside it. Nothing unusual at first glance, but in the reflection of the glass, in the faint glare of the candlelight, was the silhouette of a man sitting across from her. A man in a gray suit, Derek's favorite color, the color he wore when he wanted to impress somebody. The angle was blurry, but I recognized the posture, the slight lean forward he always made when talking to someone he wanted to charm. I didn't reply to Jordan right away. I just sat there staring at the photo, my fingers tightening until my knuckles went white. I didn't cry. I just felt something in my chest stretch so tight it hurt to breathe. Then I wrote back, we need to confirm this. Jordan agreed instantly. We both started digging deeper into Naomi's schedule, Jordan through her emails, me through the joint bank account Derek never thought I'd look at. And there it was, a charge from the exact restaurant Naomi tagged. On the exact same night, at the exact same time, for the exact price of dinner for two. That was the moment I knew more clearly than ever Derek wasn't the man I married anymore. He wasn't just cheating. He was investing himself, his time, his money, his emotions into another woman. A cold wave crawled down my spine. But that still wasn't what made me decide everything. The real turning point came from one stupid slip of his own tongue. We were eating dinner, honey roasted chicken, his favorite. Halfway through the plate, Derek said something I don't think he meant to let out. Nah. Somebody at the office said. He bit his lip, stirred his food, wouldn't look at me. I put my fork down. Who were you about to say, Derek? He froze. No one. I just misspoke. But that name wasn't no one. That name was one syllable that dropped into the room like a block of ice. Now there is no winter colder than the moment a man accidentally says the name of the woman he's betraying you with. There is no silence heavier than the silence we both sat in after that slip. I nodded, didn't say another word. But in that moment, I understood something. Derek wasn't careful anymore. And when a cheater gets sloppy, it means their double life is starting to crumble. The next night, I met Jordan at our usual cafe. The moment he walked in, I knew he had something big. His face was pale, eyes swollen like he hadn't slept in days. Maya, I got something new. I straightened up. Tell me. He handed me a stack of papers. I pulled these from Naomi's counseling schedule. Inside were 2 months of Naomi's client appointments. And right there in black ink, client Derek Johnson, 4 sessions. Topic: exploring new romantic direction after a period of delay. I turned the page. Internal note: client, struggling with marriage. Shows increasing interest in ending current relationship to start a new one. I read that line again and again. Start a new relationship with who? Naomi, someone else. Both of us were nothing but stepping stones on his way to something new. I stood up, pacing just to breathe. My hands were shaking, not out of weakness, but because the anger inside me was rising too fast to hold. Derek had gone to his mistress to ask how he should leave me. Is there a humiliation deeper than that? To watch the man you once loved sit with the woman he's cheating with and ask her for guidance about your future? Jordan came over, placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. You don't deserve this. I know. My voice came out rough, tight like a steel cable pulled to its limit. I turned to him. We need a plan. Jordan blinked, then nodded quickly, like a man who understood exactly what kind of war we were stepping into. He sat down, opened his laptop. Where do we start? I closed my eyes, replaying every moment of the past weeks, every pattern, every slip, every meeting, every lie, and suddenly it was all clear. The whole blueprint. I opened my eyes and looked straight at him. We start with the next big holiday. Jordan frowned. You mean Christmas? I nodded. Yes. The day Derek considers sacred, the day he thinks I'll always hold for family. Jordan sat back, let that sink in, then straightened himself. You want to turn Christmas into the day they face what they've done? I answered softly. I want to turn it into the day they'll never forget. Jordan looked at me with respect, not shock, and extended his hand. Then we do it together. I took his hand, a handshake, not between strangers anymore, but between two people who lost too much to stay quiet. When we left the cafe, the cold wind slapped us in the face. But for the first time in weeks, my heart felt warm. Not from love, not from hope, but from knowing I was finally taking back control of my own life. Christmas, the day people wrap gifts of love, would become the day I wrapped up the truth, placed it on the table, and let them open it in front of each other. And from that moment on, my plan officially began. Ever since I decided Christmas would be the night everything came to light, I felt this strange kind of energy inside me, not anger anymore, but something colder, calmer, sharp, like a sheet of glass on a winter night. Maybe that's what happens when a woman has cried herself dry, the feelings stop spilling out and start hardening into will. Derek was still living in the same house as me, still touching my back at night, still asking what I wanted for dinner, still sneaking messages when he thought I wasn't looking. The only difference was this: I wasn't the unaware wife standing beside him anymore. I'd step back like a few paces far enough to see the whole chessboard from above. Some nights he'd sit next to me on the couch, trying to wrap himself in that fake intimacy I used to crave. You know, he said once, fingers sliding through my hair, I think we should do something really cozy for Christmas this year. That hand used to be my idea of safety. Now, it felt like thin ice pressing against my throat. One wrong move and it would crack. I smiled soft enough that Derek probably thought it was real. Whoever you want to invite, invite them, I said. Christmas is the season for opening hearts, right? His eyes lit up. For a second, I saw pure relief wash over his face, that guilty kind of relief. Maybe I could invite Naomi. I mean, she's new in town, no family close by. He said it like he was asking for permission, like I was so generous I'd let my husband bring the woman he's cheating with to our family holiday. I turned to him slowly, letting him see something in my eyes he didn't recognize yet. My yes did not equal forgiveness. Sure, I said. Go ahead and invite her. Derek blinked. Those 6 seconds of silence stretched out like a whole universe. You sure, of course. I think Christmas should be a place where everyone feels welcome. He pulled me into his arms like he was grateful I was that understanding. But even as he held me, I could feel how far away we truly were. I realized I was hugging a man I no longer trusted. And in that moment, I knew I'd crossed a line. Not every woman finds the strength to cross. A few days later, I went to the grocery store to get everything ready. I picked each item with a calm that almost scared me. Chicken butter wine, vegetables, scented candles. To anyone watching, I was just a wife preparing for a warm Christmas dinner, but I knew every single thing sliding across that checkout belt was a brick in the trap I was building. My phone buzzed. Jordan, tonight I'll send you Naomi's movement schedule for the week. You need to see every time she meets Derek. I texted back, good. I want everything precise. Right after I hit send, I saw Derek at the end of the aisle. He was pushing a cart turning the corner. He didn't see me. Naomi was beside him. She laughed and brushed his arm with her hand. So gentle, so familiar, so intimate it made my stomach knot up. I stood still behind the shelf. For the first time in weeks, I almost felt my body shake. Derek said something that made Naomi laugh out loud, that soft, sweet laugh I knew had once made him fall for her. I didn't step out, didn't confront them, didn't make a scene. My calm wasn't submission anymore. It was strategy. I didn't need to pull the curtain back to see what he was doing. He'd already pulled it for me clear as day. When Naomi wrapped her arm loosely around his back, I turned away. Not because I was jealous, but because I knew their day of explaining themselves was coming. The days that followed felt like watching a movie where I was both the main character and the director. Jordan and I shared information constantly. I knew where Naomi went, who she met, what she did. I knew what Derek lied about when he talked to me. I knew every crack in the story they thought they'd hidden. And most importantly, I knew that on Christmas Eve, I would put every piece of that truth on the table, right in front of both of them. Not so people would say I was strong, not so anyone could call me noble, but so they'd be forced to look at themselves fully and without cover. One night, while I was dusting the living room, Derek walked in looking a little uneasy. Maya, I feel like we've been kind of distant lately. You got something you don't want to say to me? A question full of irony from a man hiding an entire double life behind my back. I didn't turn around. Why you think that I asked? You feel like you avoiding me. Or maybe you scared I know something. I turned around right as I said it. My eyes hit him like steel, sliding against steel. Derek swallowed so hard I could hear it. He gave this weak little laugh. I'm just asking, that's all. Then don't worry, I told him. Everything's gonna be clear soon. He froze. I knew that one sentence sent 100 little movies running through his head, but he'd never picked the right one. Because he didn't know me well enough to understand when I go quiet. I'm not shutting down. I'm getting ready. Christmas crept closer. I played music, mopped floors, laid out the red tablecloth, hung the lights. My hands moved on autopilot, but my mind was locked in on the plan. I texted Jordan to confirm the time. His answer was short, I'll be there on time. Just follow what we agreed on. The way he wrote it, quick, sharp clipped, told me he was just as wound up as I was. Even though we were both the ones who'd been betrayed, standing on the same side made the weight of it all a little easier to carry. While I was polishing the silverware, Derek came up behind me and wrapped his arms around my waist. My, thank you for being okay with Naomi coming. I know this isn't easy. I lifted his hands off me. It's not hard at all, I said. It's just dinner. He studied my face a little longer than usual. Maybe he felt something strange in how smoothly the words came out. But he didn't dare ask. And that right there is exactly why he couldn't stop what was coming. On the night of the 24th, a light snow was falling outside. Naomi texted Derek that she was on her way. Jordan confirmed he was ready. My house glowed with warm lights, cinnamon candles filling the air, dinner already done. Derek paced the room more tense than usual, checking the mirror, adjusting his shirt, smoothing his hair 4 or 5 times in a matter of minutes. I watched him feeling a strange mix of pity and cruelty in my chest. Not pity, because he deserved grace. Pity, because he had no idea he was walking straight into the courtroom of his own life. When the doorbell rang, Derek looked at me for one brief second, one short, terrified second, then went to open it. Naomi stood there in a white dress, red lips, eyes shining like she was the gift Christmas had sent to my front door. She smiled. Merry Christmas, Maya. I answered with a small smile, so gentle, it was hard to tell if it was real or not. Thank you. Welcome to dinner. I stepped aside to let them in. And as the two of them walked past me into the home I once believed was the safest place in my world, I knew tonight the truth would be served as the main course, and I was the one holding the knife. I led Naomi into the living room like she was some kind of honored guest. Warm golden lights, the Christmas tree wrapped in red ribbons, gift boxes neatly stacked underneath. Everything was so picture perfect, it made my breath hitch with how ironic it all felt. All that beauty meant for peace, for joy, was about to witness the exact opposite, the rawest kind of breaking. Naomi looked around, clearly delighted. She touched an ornament, complimented the tree, then smiled at Derek like she'd helped decorate this house herself. The way she moved, soft, confident, that little tilt of her head when she talked made it very clear why Derek fell. But at the same time, I noticed something else. The way she leaned just a little toward him, the way her lashes fluttered whenever he laughed, the way her lips tightened when she saw me casually touch Derek's shoulder as I walked by. She wanted to claim something, but I didn't need to claim anything because I already knew everything was about to spill into the open. Derek pulled out a chair for her, a gesture so polite it twisted something low in my stomach. Not from jealousy, but because I remembered all the nights I was sick, hurting so bad I couldn't stand straight, and he'd toss his keys on the table and say, "You good, I gotta go to a meeting." The gentleman Naomi was getting wasn't the man I married. It was the man he crafted for her. We all sat down. Candlelight flickered against the wine glasses, something beautiful but cold. I poured wine for each of them, my hand steady, my face calm. Derek shot me a quick look, surprised, almost confused at how composed I was. Naomi smiled sweetly. "Thank you for inviting me, Maya. I really appreciate it." Her voice was honey, but her eyes carried a glimmer of quiet arrogance. I knew her type well, women who believe their presence in someone else's world is some kind of blessing. I gave her a soft smile that made Derek shift in his seat. "I wanted everyone to be here tonight," I said. Naomi's eyebrows dipped just slightly. She heard something off in my tone, but not enough to understand it. Dinner was served. Derek tried his best to keep things light, asking about work, about Naomi's difficult clients, asking me about my morning meeting. But in every pause, in every misplaced word, in every flicker of his eyes, I saw it, the fear he couldn't hide. He didn't know that I knew, but he knew something was off. Naomi talked like she was giving a TED talk about her own brilliance. She spoke about couples rebuilding trust, about women not strong enough to keep their husbands, about men seeking emotional comfort elsewhere. I listened, didn't interrupt, didn't react, just watched. And that silence alone made the air get heavier. Derek darted a look at Naomi when she said, "Some women think keeping quiet will keep their husbands close. But honestly, silence only widens the gap." She said it while looking straight at me. I lifted my glass, took a slow sip, and smiled. Didn't fall into her trap. Didn't give her the reaction she wanted. My calmness only rattled Derek more. He put his glass down harder than he meant to. His fingers tapped against each other like he wanted to speak, but fear held his throat shut. That's when Naomi tilted her head toward me. "Maya, I really want to ask, isn't it difficult letting outsiders into your home?" A polite sounding question, a needle wrapped in velvet. I met her eyes. Not at all, I said. Christmas is about gathering, family, and anyone who's become close to family in other ways. She blinked, heat flaring in her eyes for half a second before she smoothed it out. "I suppose you're a very generous woman. And you," I said softly, "are very bold, walking into any man's house you feel connected to." Derek flinched. His eyes went from me to her, back to me, panic flickering like a shadow. Naomi set down her knife, her fingers tightening. "Maya, what are you implying?" "Nothing," I said, my voice silk soft. "I admire your confidence. Not everyone is brave enough to show up in the life of a man who already has a wife." Derek inhaled sharply. He knew I was inching closer to the line. But me, I hadn't even touched it yet. I was dragging them toward it inch by inch. I stood and said I'd go to the kitchen for dessert. Naomi tried to get up to help, but I lifted a hand to stop her. "No need. Y'all sit." She lowered herself slowly. I saw her glance at Derek, searching his eyes for reassurance or clarity. But Derek had none to give. He was tied in knots, hands fidgeting under the table leg, bouncing like he was bracing for a storm he couldn't see. I stepped into the kitchen, but not for dessert. I stood behind the door, listening. Naomi whispered, "I feel like something's off." Derek replied, voice low and shaky, "I don't know. Maya's been different lately. You said she agreed." "She did. But I don't know if I believe it." Naomi's voice dropped even lower. "You think she knows?" A long pause. Finally, Derek exhaled. "No. Maya would never do anything." unusual. He said it like he was trying to convince himself more than her. I closed my eyes, a small smile slid across my lips, one I didn't even try to stop. They had no idea the most unusual thing I'd ever done was stay quiet long enough to let them expose themselves. I finally picked up the dessert plate and walked back out like nothing happened. Dessert's ready, I said. Hope you both enjoy. Naomi smiled, but the corner of her mouth twitched. Derek stared into his water glass like it had turned into poison. Dinner continued, but every sip of wine felt heavy as stone. Naomi talked less, her eyes flicking toward the front door. Derek kept wiping his palms with the napkin, even though they weren't wet. Both of them were strung tight, like strings about to snap. They could feel something coming. They just didn't know it had been standing behind them the whole night. And I, the woman who'd once been shattered, sat there, calm, quiet, steady, feeling every shift in the air. Christmas is supposed to be a night of light. But tonight, that light would shine directly on what they'd tried to hide in the dark. And all I had to do now was wait for the moment the front door would open one more time. I heard the soft clink of a fork tapping against a plate in a room so quiet I could hear my own heartbeat. Naomi kept her head bowed over her slice of cake, but her eyes kept sliding over to Derek, searching for something I already knew he couldn't give. Derek kept pulling air in through his teeth, the way people do when they're holding on to the last bit of calm they've got left. The room looked like a Christmas card, perfectly decorated, warm and glowing, but the air inside it was heavy as iron. The candle burned with that gentle cinnamon scent, but tonight, the taste of it was bitter going down. Every time my eyes met Derek's, he inhaled like he'd just been punched in the chest. Naomi couldn't sit still. Her fingers dug into the edge of the tablecloth, those carefully manicured nails trembling more and more with each minute. I stood up slowly. I'm gonna grab some more wine, I said, my voice soft, like a little draft slipping through a cracked door. Derek jumped up almost instantly. I'll get it for you. No need, I replied, keeping the thin little smile on my lips. I started walking toward the kitchen, and right then, the doorbell rang. It wasn't loud, but it sliced through the room like ice cracking under a boot. Derek froze in the middle of the floor, his eyes snapping toward the door. Naomi's hand stopped mid-motion, her eyes widening in shock. For half a second, the two of them looked at each other, just half a second, but it was long enough for me to see exactly what they were trying to hide. Fear. Derek turned to me, his voice shaky. Are you expecting someone? I wiped my hands on the dish towel, set the wine glass back on the table, and walked toward the door, each step calm, measured so slow I could hear the wood creak beneath my feet. When I opened it, Jordan was standing there. He wore a long brown coat, little specks of snow clinging to his shoulders. His eyes were heavy, but steady. He looked at me, and in that one look, without a single word, we both knew it was time. I stepped aside to let him in. Jordan crossed the doorway, leaving the winter cold outside, but bringing another kind of cold with him. The cold of the truth. Naomi shot up from her chair. Jordan, you... What are you doing here? Derek went rigid. His eyes stretched wide, the whites showing clear. Jordan looked straight at Naomi, then at Derek, then back at me like he was checking one last time that he was doing the right thing. I folded my hands in front of me and said quietly, I invited him. Naomi's hand flew to her mouth, her face draining of color. She stumbled back half a step, shaking her head over and over. Jordan, no. I can explain. He let out a short, broken laugh, the kind of laugh that hurts to hear because you know it came from somewhere deep and raw. Explain, he said, his voice low as it dropped. Explain what exactly the video calls at 11 at night, the shared hotel receipts, or the part where you scheduled a counseling session for him, a married man. Derek flinched. Naomi's mouth opened, but nothing came out. I moved back to the table, pulled out my chair, and sat down, motioning lightly. Y'all go ahead and sit. We're not done eating. Jordan caught my meaning, then sat across from Derek. The air thickened, almost solid. Naomi stood there, trembling like the floor beneath her was starting to crack open. Derek tried to swallow. When he finally spoke, his voice scraped out like metal on stone. Maya. What is this? What are you doing? I folded my arms on the table. I'm not doing anything, I said. I just invited the people who needed to be in the same room tonight. Isn't Christmas supposed to be about coming together? Derek stared at me, his face tightening and loosening like his skin was trying to catch up to what his mind couldn't process. Eventually, Naomi sat back down. But it wasn't the way a guest sits. It was the way someone sits when they haven't yet realized they've already lost. I laced my fingers together and began, well then, since we're all here, I think it's time we talk honestly. Derek shook his head hard. Maya, you don't understand. I understand. Jordan cut in, voice sharp. Me and Maya understand perfectly. I leaned over to the side table, pulled out a stack of papers from the drawer. The sound of the pages flipping was dry and loud. I set them down in the middle of the table between Derek and Naomi. These are your schedules, I said to her. Your sessions, your events, your client meetings. And more importantly, the dates you met with Derek. Naomi narrowed her eyes, lips trembling. Maya, you've got it all wrong. I didn't say you were wrong, I replied. I just said these are your records. Derek grabbed the stack, but his hands were shaking so badly the pages bent. He read the first line out loud under his breath. Counseling session, Derek Johnson, emotional decision-making, support. His voice died mid-sentence. He couldn't go any further. Jordan let out a bitter laugh. Beautiful, isn't it? He said. I'm out here planning a wedding with a woman who's giving me emotional guidance to the man she's cheating with. Naomi gasped for air, tears. Spilling, but they weren't tears of remorse. They were the tears of someone who's been caught without time to fix their mask. She turned toward Derek. You told me you were going to end things with her. I let out a small laugh, thin, sharp. I'm guessing her is me. I asked, my voice quiet but cutting. Naomi froze, shame flooding her face. Derek threw a hand up, almost shouting, Naomi, what are you talking about? Don't, I cut in. Still calm. Don't make yourself the weakest man at this table. He turned to me. Maya, please. Just give me a chance to explain. You already did, I said, to her. Derek went still like someone had flipped a switch and turned him to stone. Jordan stared at him, eyes hard enough to cut. I've got more, Jordan added, placing his phone on the table. Texts, receipts, dates. You told him you wanted to spend Christmas with him, Naomi. You said that. Naomi reached out to grab the phone, but Jordan pulled it back. I sat there watching like an audience member at a play, except this was a play I'd written. Derek braced himself on the table, his head hanging low. I didn't know you were going to do this. You're right, I said. You didn't, because you never thought I was capable of understanding the truth. Naomi started sobbing harder now, loud, messy, dramatic. But it wasn't grief, it was exposure. Derek snapped at her. Stop it, you're making this worse. Naomi slammed her palms on the table. You promised me. You said you were leaving her. The silence that followed was explosive, not because no one knew what to say, but because everything that needed to be said had already fallen out. I inhaled softly and rested my hand on another stack of papers inside the drawer. Divorce papers. I didn't pull them out yet, not time. Not quite, but they were there, like a blade waiting on the table. I looked at the three people in front of me, Naomi unraveling, Derek breaking, Jordan holding himself together by bare threads, and me, the one who used to sit in the center of the hurt, now sitting above it, not because I'm better than any of them, but because I have already walked through the fire they're just now touching. I placed my hand gently on the table. Now I said slowly, I think it's time we talk about the most important part. The room fell into absolute silence. I looked straight at Derek, the man I had once handed my whole life to, and got ready to say the words that would change all of ours forever. When I looked at Derek, I looked at him in a way I had never done in all the years we were together. No hatred, no begging, no heartbreak. Just a woman standing in front of a truth too big to bow down to anymore. Derek's fingers tapped the edge of the table like he needed something to hold on to so he wouldn't collapse. He opened his mouth, but all that came out was a trembling breath. Naomi was still quietly crying beside him, and Jordan sat back in his chair, eyes dark and bottomless. like he was staring straight into the part of himself he wished he never had to meet. I breathed slow and steady, opened the drawer beside the dining table, and pulled out a cream colored envelope. My hands were calm, so calm I almost asked myself how many times in my life I had ever stood this firm. I laid the envelope in front of Derek. He stared at it like it was something alive, something dangerous, and deep down he knew he didn't want to touch it. Maya, what is this? I said softly. A Christmas gift? He flinched back in his seat, instinct pulling him away from the truth. I nudged the envelope closer. Go ahead, open it. Derek tore the top with shaking hands. He pulled out the papers, and the moment his eyes landed on the first line, I knew this was the kind of memory that would haunt him for the rest of his life. Divorce papers. His voice cracked like glass dropping on tile. Naomi slapped a hand over her mouth, eyes blown wide. Jordan closed his eyes slowly, like he was watching something painful he understood too well but still hated to witness. You you really want to end this, Derek whispered, every ounce of pride gone. No, I said. This isn't ending anything. This is you finally receiving what you created. He threw the papers on the table so hard they slid across the wood. He jumped to his feet. Maya, we can talk about this. I made a mistake, but you can't destroy our whole life just because destroy. I rose slowly, my voice quiet but sharp enough to split the room open. For years, I had never raised my voice at this man. But tonight, I wasn't speaking like a wife trying to save a marriage. I was speaking like a woman who had reached the end of endurance. Derek, you cheated. You lied. You made me the second option. You met her while I was in the hospital. You sat with your mistress talking about your future. You brought her into this home, into our life. I placed a hand over my chest. And now you want to convince me I'm the one who ruined us silence. Not even Naomi, drowning in her panic, dared to interrupt. I looked at Jordan. He nodded once, slow, the unspoken solidarity between two people who had both lived under the same blade of betrayal. I turned back to Derek. I'm divorcing you. I'm done piecing together whatever you left behind. I won't fix something you never valued. And I'm done sleeping next to a man I have to protect myself from. Derek put both hands on his head, stepping back like the words were hitting him physically. Maya, please, I love you. I swear I love you. I let out a laugh, not bitter, not mocking, just tired. The kind of laugh you make after your pain has finally burned itself out. You don't love me. You love the comfort of being forgiven. But I'm not that woman anymore. Naomi stood abruptly, voice breaking. Derek, I thought you said you were going to shut up. He snapped sharp enough to cut. Naomi froze, tears spilling openly. Jordan stood his chair, scraping softly. I'm done. I don't belong in this mess anymore. He gave me one last look full of respect, sorrow, and a quiet kind of gratitude. I hope you'll be okay, Maya. I will, I said, thank you. Jordan walked out, taking the winter chill with him like the final period at the end of a long chapter. Naomi ran after him, calling his name, but he never looked back. The door closed behind them, and silence fell so heavy it sounded like snowfall. Just me and Derek. He sank into the chair, elbows on his knees, covering his face with his hands. Don't do this. Don't leave me. You left me first. I walked to the window, watching the snow fall soft and quiet across the yard. You had so many chances to keep me, but every time I hurt you walked farther away, until the only person I had left was myself. He didn't answer, and for the first time in this whole story, he truly had nothing left to say. 2 days later, he moved out. No begging, no screaming, no last-minute promises. He packed his things without looking at me and walked out the same door I'd stood by for years, waiting for him to come home. Naomi disappeared from my life overnight. Jordan sent one final message. She admitted everything. I'm moving out too. The rest goes to the lawyers. We never spoke again. Not out of bitterness, we just knew we were meant to help each other stand up, not walk the same road forever. I stayed alone in the house that once held our laughter, but for the first time, I didn't feel lonely. I felt light, light like slipping off a soaked winter coat that had been weighing you down for too long. In the days that followed, I cleared the house of Derek's shadows, old letters, forgotten shirts, his favorite candles, our framed pictures. I changed the sheets, changed the curtains, painted the living room, not to forget him, but to remember me. I started running every morning, lungs burning, but heart warming up again. I poured myself into a new project in my studio. The same hands that once trembled from heartbreak now tremble from inspiration. I saw my friends again, had brunch dates, sipped coffee slow, and spent time with myself in ways I had forgotten were even possible. I wasn't waiting for Derek to return. I wasn't waiting for a new love. I was waiting for Maya to come back. And one morning, standing in my bedroom, with sunlight settling on my cocoa brown skin, I looked in the mirror at the woman who had once bent herself in half for love, who had once crumbled under pain. And I saw her standing tall, proud, peaceful. I pressed my hand against my chest, the same chest that had cracked into 100 pieces. It had healed, not perfectly, but healed, healed in my own way. That Christmas was the worst day of my life, but it was also the moment everything changed, the moment I stopped living to be loved and started living to love myself first. And that was the real gift. When everything was finally behind me, I realized life hadn't collapsed the way I once feared. It didn't fall apart, it simply shook off years of dust so I could see myself clearly for the very first time. In the months after the divorce, I learned how to live again, not as a betrayed woman, but as a woman standing on her own 2 feet. I poured myself into the work I loved, writing the stories I once held back, letting my pain rise to the surface so it could turn into power instead of something buried deep inside me. The house was peaceful now. No more sneaking footsteps, no unfamiliar perfume lingering in the air. Just the sound of my own breathing, steady, full grounded, like I was finally allowed to exist in a space that belonged to me. A year after that Christmas night, I lit a candle, set a small cake on the table, and celebrated myself. Not because I had forgotten everything, but because I kept walking even when I was still scared. I learned happiness doesn't come from someone choosing you, it comes from you choosing yourself. Every day, every hour, every moment you dare to say, I deserve more than the hurt I survived. And sometimes when I look back on that Christmas, I don't see it with anger anymore. I see it with a strange kind of gratitude. Because if that brutal moment hadn't happened, I might have never found the real woman living inside me all along. So if you're still listening, I want to ask you something. What moment do you think is powerful enough to make a woman stop looking back for good? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to hear your answer.